Good morning. First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone here this morning. It's really great to see everyone. It's kind of a messy day outside. I haven't decided whether it's raining or not. It was really weird. Tyler was not supposed to be here anyway this morning. He was supposed to be in Virginia with a church he used to be a minister at, and he was really looking forward to that. And that wasn't able to happen because, to say the least, Tyler has had an interesting week. Keep him in your prayers, please. He really needs those at this time. As I move into the lesson, I want you to answer a question. Have you ever been the victim of a crime? And how did that make you feel? Maybe you woke up one morning and someone had stolen all 4 tires off your car. That actually happened in our neighborhood in Baytown one time, and fortunately it was only Ford trucks. And there was a lot of Ford trucks up and down the street, sitting on blocks in the morning. That would be devastating in a lot of ways, not to mention just inconvenient. Or maybe someone broke the window in your car or slashed a convertible top. Did all that damage for a car charger and a couple dollars. But really messed with your stuff. How about on a little more personal level? A little more intrusive, if you will. Have you ever come home to find your house had been robbed, burglarized? I have. The first time was really interesting. They kicked in the front door, and then they opened the garage door, and it was 2 doors with a pillar in the middle, and they hit the pillar on the way in or the way out and destroyed that. And then they took a lot of our stuff, and it was just stuff. I think it was the damage to the house that probably bothered me more than anything else. But it was just stuff, and it wasn't life-altering, and it wasn't anything of eternal importance. It was just stuff. My biggest concern, and you might want to laugh at this, was my poor little kitty cat. We had a black and white cat, tuxedo cat, weighed about 20 pounds. He wasn't a little kitty cat. But he was so traumatized by the break-in and everything that happened that he turned gray for a year. Seriously, turned gray. And I don't know what you would do or what you have done. I, of course, called the police, and I knew that they would probably never solve this crime. It wasn't a big crime in the overall scope of things. It was just small potatoes. But it was big to me. But I knew there were bigger and more serious issues out there, and I just had to get over it. But I have to admit, I felt violated because someone had come into my home, went through my stuff, our stuff. I was angry. The second time was a little bit different. It was announced at Sunday evening worship that Ann and I were taking the teenagers to the roller ring for a devotional with other churches in Pasadena that no longer exist, by the way. We would bring the kids back to the building about 9:30, and it's during that period of time that our house was actually robbed. We did have suspects, and you know, I was probably more disappointed than angry, but if I'm being serious, I was angry too. If you haven't been a victim of a crime, if someone hasn't just taken something from you that belongs to you, that's great. I hope you continue your life through without having to have that experience. But look at statistics. It could happen any day. Don't let your guard down. If you look at those statistics, they'll scare you. And there's a good chance sometime, again, during your life, you're going to be a victim. But there's something going on right now around you. There are things being stolen from you every day, and you're not paying attention. While we have been sleeping, our families are being stolen from us piece by piece. And if we continue along the path we're on right now, it will have eternal consequences. And it did not happen all at once. Nobody came and kicked in the door. It happens a little bit at a time. The messages are there. They keep coming and they keep bombarding us. One commercial or one television show, one song, one internet click. They're there. They're invading your family and they're chipping away at it slowly. A little bit here and a little bit there. And I believe that this all started with the fact that there is no such thing anymore as an absolute truth. Ask around. A few years back, I was teaching a high school Bible class. I walked into the class and I needed to know where that group was spiritually. So I started with the truth. I said, is there anything that you can think of that's always true? And much to my disappointment, they were having trouble coming up with something that's always true. So I started asking questions. How about stealing? Is it wrong? Well, if your family's hungry, it would be the right thing to do to make sure your family is fed. That was kind of scary. I was really amazed at where the conversation went. I said, well, what about Jesus? Is Jesus the truth? Can we establish that Jesus is the truth? This is the response that I want you to think about. Well, I don't know. Because, if I'm talking to someone and they don't believe in Jesus, then it may not be the truth for them. John 14, verse 6. Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. People, there are certain things that are just true. Whether you believe it or not, it's still true, and it's going to be true. So truth, by definition, is really simple. It's a body of real things, events, and facts. For example, in front of each of you right now is a songbook. It says hymns or songs of faith, and if you open it, there are songs with notes and music, and it's there. It's a songbook. Whether you believe it's a songbook or not, it's a book with songs in it, so it's a songbook. We can take that as the truth. You can call it a hymnal if you want to, if that makes you feel better, but at the core, it's still a book with songs. It's a songbook. God is truth. God is real. God is alive. God is truth. Jesus as the Son of God is truth. And the Bible as the inspired Word of God is truth. And if you need to be walked through those truths, we will be glad to do that at any time. You can talk to the elders here. You can talk to Tyler. You can talk to any member here, and we will point you in the right direction to know that. But even the Bible says that it's okay to challenge things. Matter of fact, I highly recommend it. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21, it states, "But test everything and hold on to what is good." Now, I had one woman one time say, well, what if they test it and they come up with a different answer than I have? And I looked at her and I said, well, we might have to take a look at whether you're right or not. They may come up with different answers. But no matter your age, no matter what you think of yourself, you need to think for yourself. Now, I'm kind of a weird individual, and the people who know me well, they'll just sit there and shake their heads. But I was teaching at a Christian school a number of years ago, and I had a 6th grade science class. And I'm going to teach you something I taught that 6th grade science class today. And I know we have a lot of folks that have worked for NASA or do work for NASA, and I need you to bear with me, because today I'm going to prove to you that the world is flat. And you know, when I announced this to my 6th graders, there was an uproar. Oh, what are you talking about? The world's not flat. And here's how I get that. Say I'm in England, and I go to the coast, and I'm standing on the coast, beautiful beach, cold, rainy because it's England. My altitude is 0 feet above sea level, correct? We good? Okay, so I cross the ocean and I'm in South Beach, Miami, and I'm standing on the beach. My altitude above sea level is 0. 0 in England, 0 in Miami. Now I'm in Galveston. I'm on the brick-hard beaches of Galveston and the brown water of Galveston, and I'm standing at the sea level, or the Gulf of Mexico, and my altitude is 0 feet above sea level, correct? 0, 0, 0. I'm in Malibu, playing beach volleyball, and I'm playing beach volleyball at sea level, which is 0. 0, 0, 0, 0. Even if you go all the way to Australia and I'm standing on the coast, I'm still at 0 feet above sea level. So it is 0. The world is flat. And you know, even 6th graders would argue that. Well, wait a minute. We've seen videos of people on the moon. Yeah, about those videos. They were all staged in a Hollywood film studio, and they look really good, and you notice they're kind of a little bit iffy, and that's the best they could do. They wanted to make it look like that. Well, but, you know, we've seen pictures from outer space. No, you really haven't. We haven't been to outer space. It's a giant fraud. We want the world to think we're ahead in the space race. So we do things like that. I finally sat there and I said, 0, 0, 0, 0, the world is flat, end of class. Go home. So what do you think these 6th graders did? Every one of them told their parents, which, by the way, was what I was looking to happen. I wanted them, when they heard something that was so blatantly wrong, to go home and talk to their parents about it to find out what the truth was. So I'd only been teaching 1 day at that point, and I got a call from every parent, and I still don't know how they got my number. And I told them each and every one of them, to wait until tomorrow and see what their child had learned. So the next day, they came to class, and I started out class by saying simply, the world is not flat. And they looked at me. I said, that's the first thing I want you to understand. The world is really not flat. The second thing I need you to understand is during the course of your life, many people will stand in front of you and try to convince you to believe their lies. There'll be people in position of authority. There'll be teachers, there'll be preachers, there'll be celebrities. And let's not forget about social pressure or peer pressure. There'll be people trying to force you to believe their lies just because they say it's true. But I need you to be aware and not be afraid to stand up for what you know is truth. You know, they still push the theory of evolution as a fact, even though it's called the theory of evolution. Why isn't it called the fact of evolution? I don't know. But I could give you several examples of things they want you to believe that are not true. And it's not a new problem. It goes back, way back, like Genesis chapter 2 back, in verses 15 through 17. The Lord took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, you may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day you eat of it, you will surely die. Then in chapter 3, the serpent comes along and he challenges the truth. And actually what he does is he says, let me give you an alternative truth. You won't really die. You'll just be like God. And God doesn't want you to be like God. See, the problem is as old as itself. And this is where we begin to lose the family. Not following God's truth and allowing all these other ideas to invade our lives. And I should add, there are some totally ridiculous ideas. But they are presented as facts, and they are presented as the truth. If you've been paying attention to Tyler's lessons for the last few weeks, he will tell you there cannot be conflicting truths. And that's true. There can't be two totally opposite things that are true. Something has to be wrong. So let me ask you a question. Back to the family. What makes a family? Whose definition do you want to use? Is there only one answer? I would like to think so. In Genesis chapter 2, 24, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Now, if you want to jump forward a little bit to the New Testament in Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 through 6. And the Pharisees came to him and tested him by asking, is it lawful to divorce one's wife for any cause? He answered, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? There's a truth for you, right there. There's probably a whole other lesson in that truth, but the Bible would seem to limit us to only males and females. So, in my world, I am not prepared to be confused by pronouns. Just saying. But let's continue. And he said, therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. The idea of a man and a woman going through life together was God's idea. Marriage between a man and a woman was God's idea. The idea of family, just the way it happened, just happens to be God's idea. On September the 21st, 1996, then President Bill Clinton, and think of him what you want, signed into law the Defense of Marriage Act. The Defense of Marriage Act was basically a very simple law. It recognized only the marriage between a man and a woman. And I think when they signed that act into law, we all took one giant deep breath. It appeared to be a victory on our side, although I'm not sure it was a necessary victory because I wasn't particularly confused about the definition of a family or a marriage at that point, because I never thought a marriage was anything other than a man and a woman. But it did appear to uphold at least the biblical belief of God's view of marriage. Now, I did say our families have been stolen a little bit at a time, a little here and a little there. And we can go back to December 16th, 1977. It's a great day. It happened to be my birthday, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. On December 16th, 1977, homosexuality was considered a mental illness, and that's according to the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Illness. When we woke up on December 17th, 1977, it was no longer considered a mental illness. Overnight, it had been cured. After this time, the whole idea of homosexuality became just above board and over the table. It became more open. It became more acceptable. in society. And I don't honestly know how I feel about it being labeled as a mental illness, but what I'm saying is this is the beginning of the shift. This is when things started to go one direction or the other. But still 20 years later, after asking for clarification to define a marriage, it was still only between a man and a woman. But the public opinion was changing. We were becoming a little bit more liberal, a little bit more slanted and open-minded, if you like those words. And I remember having a discussion with a friend a number of years ago, and he had just completed a study on marriage, divorce, and remarriage. And his conclusion at the end of the study was that if your divorce was legal in your state, then it was probably okay with God. And I said, there's a lot of things that are legal that are not okay with God. For example, and this is what I said back then, and this is quite a while back, I said, if it's legal for me to marry Bill down the street, is that okay with the church? Is that okay with God? And my friend looked at me, he said, now you're just being ridiculous. On December 13th, 2022, President Biden signed into law the Respect for Marriage Act, which is really anything but a respect for marriage, in my opinion. That gave legal standing to the same-sex marriages and interracial marriages. That's the way it works in our government, though. Sometimes they pass a law, they decide they don't like it so much, though they pass another law to take care of the first law. We call that progress. God isn't so much concerned about social change or progress unless that progress or that change puts us more in the direction of God's will. Not all change is bad, not all change is good, but this act is a direct assault on the family, on marriage. At least they could call it something else. Civil union, I was okay with that. But why try to make it fit into the category of marriage, which wasn't their idea in the first place? When I was teaching that same high school class, they asked me one time, why are you picking on this particular sin? First of all sin is bad. I have no problem with that. And yes, I am a sinner. I have things I struggle with, and I'm not okay with that, but I wish it wasn't there. And I struggle with sin every day. And anyone who say they don't, you should be aware of that person. But society is not asking me to accept all sins. Society hasn't asked me to condone murder. It hasn't got to the point where it's just fine for me to go down and shoot you yet. Well, when I wrote that, I thought about that, and I said, well, that might be true, but still they want me to condone abortion and assisted suicides, euthanasia. There's a lot of things they would like me to consider that's basically murder. But that's, again, for another lesson at another time. And society hasn't gotten to the point where it's okay for me to just beat you in the head and walk away with your stuff. We haven't gotten to that point yet, so there are still things in society that we can't do. But society expects me to, just accept same-sex marriages. And not only do I have to accept it, I have to applaud it. I have to say, hey, that's great, you're so brave. And I can't do that. I will not protest against it. I will not carry a sign. I will not throw tomatoes. I will not do anything aggressive against it. But I will teach this lesson, which, by the way, is probably breaking the law in several countries right now. But we need to stand up. I am not willing to encourage an activity that is openly sinning. I may end up in jail someday, but I look good in orange. People will call you names, by the way. There are people who will be offended with what I said today, and people here will be offended, and I probably won't apologize for that, because if you're offended when someone points out sin, then it's probably more your problem than mine. But I know that people will call you names for standing up for truth. They'll call you a homophobe, they'll call you intolerant, they'll call you bigoted. They'll call you a Jesus freak. They'll call you a radical, and that's okay because they called Jesus names too. But the goal of calling you a name is to put you on in such a defensive posture that you cannot speak the truth. You're so busy defending yourself that the truth will not be able to get out. We have to be strong enough to continue the fight. Young families have to be strong enough to make sure that they understand the definition of a family and not the society's definition of a family. We have to fight for our families. Edmund Burke is credited with the saying, "The only thing necessary for a triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." And if you want the biblical verse for that, you can look at James 4:17. "For whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin." So what can I do? You know, I refer to myself sometimes as a recovering youth minister. I've passed through youth ministries a few times during the years of my life, and the last one was about 6 years ago, and I was way too old for youth ministry. But the good thing is the teenagers are still the same. They're still teenagers. And what I had going for me the last time through was kind of a unique thing. I didn't have to be young. I didn't have to be cool. I didn't have to be hip because that ship had sailed so long ago. You know, all I had to do was to love them. And they felt that. And it was amazing to me, though, that teenagers today, the young people today, are so stressed. They're being pulled in every direction. There's a psychological test that I used to use on a lot of my classes, and it was a stress inventory. You get so many points for so many events in your life, and every time I gave them to a group of high school kids, it was amazing. They were so far off the charts in stress that it's amazing any of them can function. Almost every one of them was in the danger zone for a stress-related illness or injury. So how can we help? Give them a stable, loving home. Teach them the truth. Give them a good base to begin their lives. Make sure if somebody tells them as blatant a story, a lie as the world is flat, that they know they can come to you and find out the truth. And show them the love of God. Be a good example. Deuteronomy 11, beginning in verse 18. "You shall therefore lay upon the words of mine in your heart and in your soul, and it shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be the frontlets between your eyes. You shall teach them to your children, talking to them when you are sitting in your house and when you are walking by the way, and when you lay down and when you rise. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and your gates, that the days and the days of your children may be multiplied in the land of the Lord, that the Lord swore to your fathers to give them, as long as the heavens are above the earth." Every chance you get, share the truth. Talk to your family. I learned the hard way how to throw out the schedule and stop when I need to make a point, when I need to teach something. Some of y'all are doing a really good job with that, by the way. Take advantage of the time you have with your family because it will never be long enough. You remember a few years back there was a fad at WWJD, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? How do you know that? Well, you have to figure out what Jesus did do. And how do you figure out what Jesus did do? You crack the Bible open and you read it. You find out for yourself. And I think so many of us has been sitting here watching the morals of our company decay, of our country, excuse me. They've been chipped away, and to a point we don't even recognize this country anymore. And I feel like the commercial in a way about becoming your parents, but I don't think the young people are ruining our country. I think we're doing a good enough job of that ourselves. I think our complacency has allowed the world to get in the condition it is today. And the world is changing rapidly. We need to help shape that change. We need a voice. Martin Niemöller was a Lutheran minister in Germany during the 1920s and the 1930s. And he supported the Nazis originally until he saw Hitler come into his power, and then he became an outspoken critic. And as a result of his criticism, he spent the last 8 years of the Nazi rule in prison camps and concentration camps. but he is best known for his post-war statement. First, they came for the socialist, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was a Jew. I was not a Jew, excuse me. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out. We need to speak out while there's still time. We need a clear definition of the family. We need a clear definition of marriage. And we need to not shy away from important conversations. We need to make sure our families know the truth. We need to make sure the church stands for the truth. One thing that I do like about Tyler is he's not afraid to tackle tough subjects. He gets criticized a lot, but he's not afraid. And yes, he's probably offended a person or two along the way. Somebody has to speak up. And I know this was kind of a different lesson, but it's something that had been nagging at me for quite a number of years. I've seen a lot of families struggle over the years. I've seen some of them fight back. I've seen some of them heal. But all our families need to be going in the direction of God's will. This morning, if you need to respond to the invitation of Christ, if you'd like to put on Christ in baptism, this is your best opportunity you're going to have. If you need to come forward for any reason this morning, we ask you to do that as we stand and we sing.